Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel. I hate rock music, and this video is going to be about another prog band that I really love. They're really interesting, really distinct from a lot of the other prog bands. So I'm trying to cover more prog bands, but I like kind of the more peculiar ones. I don't like the Genesis wannabes and the Yes wannabes and the ELP wannabes. I like progressive bands that really carve their own territory. A band like Spring, for example. And so this video is about GNIDROLOG, and I guess the name came from a play on words of the two brothers whose last name is Goldring. So somehow the name GNIDROLOG came out of that. So I was kind of curious what that odd name was. And the band was around from 1969 to 1973. And the lineup was Stuart Goldring on guitar and vocals, Colin Goldring on lead vocals, rhythm guitar, recorder, saxophone, um, and harmonica, and then Nigel Pegram on drums, percussion, flute, oboe, and piano, John Earl on saxes and flute, Pete Cowling on bass and cello, and Rick Kemp on bass, and then another keyboard player, Nessa Glenn. And so they kind of augmented the lineup between the first and second album. So they definitely have a different sound on the first and the second album. And Rick Kemp is kind of interesting sidelight. He actually was hired by King Crimson in 1971 and only stayed with him for 2 weeks. So then he left, and Boz Burrell joined King Crimson on bass and vocals. And so it would have been interesting if Rick Kemp had joined. And Nigel Pegram, the drummer, used to be in a band called Spice that put out a number of singles, and there's a bunch of unreleased material that's available out there by them now, and it's the early version of Uriah Heep before they changed their name to Uriah Heep. So that's their pedigree. And so they released two albums. In Spite of Harry's Toenail came out in 1972, and then Lady Lake came out later in 1972. And in 1999, a live 1972 album was released. And so we have three records by GNIDROLOG, and they're really interesting. It's another one of those bands. I'm not really going to go through all their songs. In Spite of Harry's Toenail, great title for an album, starts off with a song that's pretty heavy. And so, I remember when I first got it, I bought it used in about 1975 at a used record store. And when you hear the first song, you think it's going to be really heavy. And that first song is pretty much the only heavy one. There's some dramatic parts with some great guitar work and a little more power and drama later in the record. But that first album, In Spite of Harry's Toenail, is generally pretty mellow. It has a nice presence. It's not annoyingly mellow, and it features a lot of flute. Um, the sax playing and brass that they brought in a lot more on Lady Lake is absent on that first album. So it's pretty sparse, but it works really nice, really sprawling tunes with a lot of interesting changes, odd time signatures. It's I like the fact in this case a lot of these progressive bands have a lot of interesting tapestries and a lot of layers. In spite of Harry's Toenail, they really allow it to breathe, and so it has a certain sparseness to it. And Steve Stuart Goldring's vocals are really nice, so they carry the record really well. And one of the other things that's peculiar about him is it's kind of a weird mix of prog and then some English folk elements and then a little bit of jazz. And so it's a pretty interesting mix. And by the time they get to the second album, Lady Lake, it's definitely a lot busier. There's a lot more brass. John Earl plays the whole family of saxes, so there's a lot of really cool sax work on it. And a lot of that carries over to the live album, Live 1972. Live 1972 actually has 3 or 4 songs on it that aren't on the album, so we get some extra material It's recorded really well, and it shows that they were a really interesting live band and managed a fair amount of drama, even though a lot of the stuff is pretty sparse. So, but all solid players, really good rhythm section. Everybody's really good at what they do. They're really good at ensemble work. Um, a lot of longer, sprawling tunes that allow a lot of variations. Sometimes I hear a little bit of Gentle Giant. I think there's a little bit of medieval uh, elements in the music that mixes in with the jazz and the folk and then the rock. So overall, really pretty fascinating band. We don't have any recordings of their '73 lineup. The first album came out on Vertigo, um, and they got dropped by Vertigo, and then they tried to carry on. So in 1973, they brought in John Knightsbridge on guitar, who used to be in Third World War, and John Bedon on drums, who used to be in the band Warm Dust. And so the Warm Dust kind of was another prog band that had a lot of similarities with GNIDROLOG. So he would have been fairly comfortable. Kind of interesting to see John Knightsbridge on guitar. He was in Third World War, which was more of a bluesy, bruising kind of British rock band. But I'm sure he had the skills to do it. But we don't have any recordings of the '73 band, and they got a pretty good exposure. You know, not only did their records get noted and got good reviews, though they didn't sell that well, and being on the Vertigo label, but they played with a lot of the big bands of that era: Coliseum, Budgie, Warhorse, David Bowie, King Crimson, Gentle Giant, Soft Machine, Magma, and Wishbone Ash, and those all would have been really good bills. And Nidrolog would have done a fine job of warming crowds up for to see those headliners. But um, Pete Cowling, the bass player, ended up with Pat Travers, of all things, the Canadian blues rock guitar player. And then, interestingly enough, was in the Flying Hat band too, which was the pre-Judas Priest band that I did a video on. So he did ended up doing a lot of hard rock work. And then Rick Kemp and Nigel Pegham, the rhythm section, and ended up in Steel Eye Span. And then John Earl did some saxophone work for both The Clash and Thin Lizzy. And then the weirdest thing I discovered uh, researching Nidrolog was that there was a punk band that came out in '77, '78 called the Pork Dukes. And they did a lot of really kind of raunchy songs. There was one called Bend and Flush. Um, I guess they were kind of a joke band, but apparently that's Stuart Goldring and Colin Goldring from Nidrolog. So they did the prog rock thing up through '73, and then 3 or 4 years later they decided to get in on the punk thing and have this kind of a joke band, Pork Dukes. And I remember buying the Pork Dukes singles because they were just so funny. And now when I listen to the Pork Dukes, I can see that it's the same singer that was in Nidrolog. So very strange thing. But Nidrolog, really great prog band. I think anybody that likes a lot of English folk rock bands are going to enjoy Nidrolog. I think if you like a little more folky jazz influence prog as opposed to classical elements or being having a lot of grandstanding and that sort of thing, they're not that kind of band. So Nidrolog definitely has an appeal to certain types of prog fans, but I like them a lot. I think they're great, and I've enjoyed these records for a lot of years. Um, and I think I enjoy them more as the years go on. I think when I first heard them, they were a little soft for me and a little precious in some respects. But their charms and personality, like a lot of these bands, as the years go on, they really you really kind of get it more, and you get comfortable with what they're doing. And Nidrolog is a great example of that. And so there you have it, Nidrolog. Check them out. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching. I Hate Rock Music.